Welcome to this month's EDUCast. I'm Deborah DeBoer, Director of Professional Development here at NSBAR, and I am delighted to have Greg Glosson as my guest today. He's someone I've known for several years now, and I am telling you, as I'm looking at his resume, he is a CRB in ABR and SRES and a Master of GRI, and that is only the beginning of what he knows. I've asked him to come here today and talk about risk in real estate. So welcome, Greg Glosson, please. Greg, thank you so much for joining us today. I have been teaching CE now for the last month for our managing brokers. And over again, I've come across the fact that they need so much help, or they have so many questions about risk inherent in the real estate community, from safety to errors and omissions and everything in the middle. I know that you've been teaching all over and you've been speaking all over. What are you seeing in your communities about risk?
Well, thank you for having me. I believe that many of the principal brokers, as you discussed, are having problems with risk management, particularly. And, I always tell brokers that one of the most important things that they can do is to follow not only state law, not only the code of ethics, but that they absolutely must have a policies and procedures manual in place, because that policies and procedures manual helps mitigate so many risks, because many times, and Deborah, you know this as well as anyone, there are so many brokers right now, because of the changing business models that we find ourselves in.
Yes.
They are expanding the number of agents that are under their supervision. Now, I can only speak for Tennessee, but Tennessee does not have a limit on the number of agents that a broker can supervise. I was recently in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I was talking to another broker, and I asked him, I said, well, how many agents do you have in your office? And he said, over 400.
Holy moly.
And I said, over 400? I said, how in the world do you supervise that many agents? Oh, well, it's not a problem. I'm able to do it. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how in the world, how do you stay up to date on all the transactions, all the paperwork, all of just the general day-to-day questions that agents have and the places that they find themselves in? I said, how do you do that? And he said, well, very frankly, he goes, we have a very good onboarding program with new agents, which I also agree is critical. And he said, there is a policies and procedures manual that we go through page by page, and then we have the agent sign off. He said, so in the event we have an issue down the road, we have something to go back to that says, yes, in fact, we did cover this. So now what's the agent, what's your question with all of this? We covered this earlier, so.
And I agree, policies and procedure manual is incredible. I'm just going to tell you, I belong to one of these online groups, and I'm not going to use the name of them, but it's all realtors on these. And there are people on there that are asking the doggonedest questions, that are spilling their guts about their clients, that are bad-mouthing other agents, that are just carrying on. And they're asking questions. They're like crowdsourcing the answer to questions. And it's like every day I want to write 10 times to this group, ask your managing broker, ask your managing broker, ask your managing broker. So we're seeing clearly there are agents out in the world in one way or another that are wandering. That's the best way I can say, that are wandering and are not. I don't know if they are unaware, unalerted. So a man who's doing a great onboarding program is great. But we're seeing questions, there's been some changes in the code of ethics, but for example, even with not brokerages, but even with agents, I've seen some antitrust stuff coming up. And it's been fascinating to me because we've always incorporated in our onboarding and our policy manual antitrust information. And we talked about some really, don't do this, don't set prices, don't do this. But some other things have really jumped to the floor of this. And I don't think our agents are even close to being aware of that.
Well, and I think that's not just a problem in your particular area, but I think that's kind of, based on my experience, it's more of a regional and national issue. I think, again, with so many business models changing, that agents are maybe a little too eager to talk about some things that they don't have any business talking about. How one broker structures their business may be completely different than another. What works for one may not work for the other, and there's usually pricing involved there. We tell all of our agents, just like you'll see in the NAR videos, if someone starts having a conversation with you and you know you're not supposed to be having that conversation, you need to leave. There's no question about that. You have to leave that conversation because you don't know, as you said, Deborah, you don't know who's going to say what later and implicate you as being part of a conversation like that. I just, that's one that just still gets me as we have more of these, social groups. It seems that there's a lot of information that's being shared, again, that absolutely has no business being shared. And there's a lot of information that's being presented out there that is completely inaccurate. I think that's one of the things, as a broker, that's one of the things that worries me is that misinformation. And especially if the broker is spread pretty thin, maybe not able to answer phone calls the way they should, maybe not able to have weekly sales meetings and get information to people. I'm afraid they go out to some of those crowd sources and try to get their own information, and many times it's incorrect. I will also say that we probably, as an industry, now some brokers are fantastic. They understand the rules. They understand how to train agents. But I'm afraid right now that we have many people who are getting into being a principal broker that don't have any business being a principal broker. Number one, they don't understand the responsibilities. Number two, they don't understand the rules and laws that we have to follow, and they are providing that misinformation to their agents. And let me give you an example. I was teaching a class last year, and I had a person in my class say, well, escalation clauses are illegal. And I said, well, where did you get that information? Well, my broker told me that. And so my question was, can you show me where the Tennessee Real Estate Commission says that they're illegal? And she said, well, my broker told me that it was illegal, so it must be. And I said, again, find me where it says. And they couldn't, of course. And so I said, to kind of end that conversation, the Real Estate Commission in my state discourages the use of an escalation clause simply because most people don't know how to use one. That goes directly back to the principal broker's responsibility to be agent's primary trainer.
And I would agree with you. And because I train agents too, I hear things sometimes that truly makes me want to put my head on my desk and just go, okay, I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know anymore. One of the interesting things that's happening here in Illinois, or at least in our association, is we are getting more new people coming into our industry, which I think is a consequence of COVID and the pandemic. More new people coming into our industry, and they're coming in at a younger point in their career. I don't want to say they're younger, but they're coming in at a younger point in their career. They are people who have lived their lives on social media. So one of the challenges that I think all associations and all companies are finding is trying to figure out the channels to send communication out to them. In yours and my early days, well, you went every week and you had an office meeting. The manager said, these are the new rules. These are this. Well, now we're not having those. Zoom meetings, which were kind of popular in the beginning of the COVID for managing meetings, now are having a few people peter in the end. So I think it's really critical that we address the fact that they are crowdsourcing their information. They're getting this information there. We've got to figure out how to use this. And this podcasting we're doing is one of the ways we're trying to do some of that stuff. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and I think you should be commended for that, because it is so critical that we get the right information out, not only to people that have just joined the industry, but for those of us that might be a little more seasoned. Again, I'll go back to my own state. I'm not required to take continuing education because I got my broker's license before the year 2000. So I'm not required to take any continuing education. As a seasoned agent and as a broker, I can promise you that I've probably taken more continuing ed than most people.
Yes.
And the reason for that is because I have a responsibility to the agents in my office to deliver them current, accurate information.
I think that's the struggle that we're all having. Our agents, even for a while, they were grandfathered in to not do CE, but all of our agents are doing CE now. You talked a little bit about confidentiality, and I'm looking at this confidentiality. I must say confidentiality 400 times a week with one thing or another, confidentiality. I know I'm positive your agency laws are different, but this whole idea of getting people to that they are the agents of, and they need to be confidential with what they know, the responsibility of that, I think that's one of the biggest risks in an office. And I actually think it was a bigger risk in the office when everybody was going into the office.
Absolutely.
Yes, when everyone was going into the office. But, I have funny stories of sitting in, somewhere local in town and hearing the whole real estate transaction in the booth next to me and knew exactly who they were talking about. Real estate, no matter how big state you live in, is a local business. So that need for confidentiality is one of the other things that I think becomes really critical. One of the other things that with our newer agents, I know I'm watching them really struggle with this. And one of them quite honestly asked me yesterday, well, where's the line? I said, what line, honey, are you talking about? What line are we talking about here? He says, where is the line when I know things, but I shouldn't say things? I thought, well, okay, that's an interesting question. And I think you're pretty smart to ask me that question. His question, for example, was in a home inspection. If I know this is wrong and that's wrong and this is wrong, do I tell that? In Illinois, we have no duty to discover. I said, think about this in terms of risk. What do you want to risk when you're talking about this? You want to talk a little bit about what you share and what you don't when you're managing your risk?
Sure. And again, going back to your initial comment about confidentiality and what agents used to do, and it still happens today. When two agents get into the office and maybe one is interested in a property that the other has listed, and they'll say, tell me about that property. Well, before they even start discussing the features of the property, it's, oh, well, let me tell you, this client is, they're getting a divorce. The husband ran off with a younger woman and the wife is sitting here struggling financially and has to sell the house. Well, I'm sorry, unless, at least in our market, if the seller has not given you specific instructions that you can disclose those things, you absolutely can't. And I believe, as you said, that the office tends to be that first place that we have confidentiality issues. As far as disclosures, our motto has always been disclose, disclose, disclose. If you know it, disclose it. And we constantly tell people, if we were to ever, and thank goodness we haven't, if we were to ever end up in a courtroom and someone says, you failed to disclose, we've got a huge issue. We've got a huge liability, not only for the agent, but for the brokerage firm as well. I'll tell you this, I'm getting ready today to put my personal residence up for sale. We have gone back, my wife and I, and we have gone through that house with a fine-tooth comb. And we are putting things in the disclosure that I know I'm not required to disclose. But having served as president of my association, having served as a division vice president for my state, I believe that I'm almost held to a little bit of a higher standard. And so we're disclosing things that, for example, We have a bathroom that occasionally will gather moisture on the ceiling. It's a freaking bathroom, right? That's going to happen. But my wife is like adamant about that needs to be in the disclosure. That needs to be in the disclosure. And she is my principal broker. So I really don't have I don't have any say in that.
You have to do what she tells you.
But you know, that's again, I'm of the opinion, and I've been trained in the way that we over disclose rather than under disclose. Under disclosing tends to be very problematic. And I want to eliminate as many problems in my business as I possibly can. And that's the way we teach and train and follow up with our agents, that it's better to over disclose than under disclose. If you, in my state especially, if you know something, you have a duty to make sure it's disclosed to everyone.
Our state is a little different. We don't have a duty to discover. So I think that saves us to some degree. What makes me nervous about in terms of risk management with some of the people, I call it the know-it-all syndrome. I'm going to be so important. I'm going to tell you everything. And for example, one of the crazy things I teach is stop having opinions and have experience instead. Talk about your experience about what you know rather than your opinions. Opinions get sued more often. And that, I think, is some of the challenges with the agents. They want to so impress everybody with all the stuff they know. No, really, that's the home inspector's job. Let the people do their job that you work with, let them do their jobs.
Right.
And build a fabulous team around you of people who are very good at doing those things.
Well, I think that's an issue for everyone. And you know, one of the things that I've learned over the last 25 years, there are times that you need, when someone asks you a question, of course, that you shouldn't answer, you know, you can give them a short, you know, let me put you in touch with the right person. And then it needs to be silent, because as real estate professionals, and I know this is true all over the country, we want to be, our value proposition needs to be that we know everything.
Right.
Well, that's not our value proposition. We don't have to know everything. And I believe firmly that if you tell a client, I'm not sure, let me get some information for you about that, I don't know, I believe that generates more trust than giving them wrong information. So
Yes,
I just feel it's really important. There are times that we definitely just need to give basic information and then be quiet.
Yes, that being quiet is really hard for us as realtors. I think it's one of the hardest things to encourage in people. Greg, you know, we've had some major changes. Well, it's really not a major change to the Code of Ethics, but it has been something that certainly since November, we have been talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And even before November, because of the demonstrations we had, particularly here in Chicago, we've been talking more about fair housing. For example, we are changing some of the names of our committees to include inclusivity. It's one of our core values to be inclusive. The example of making people aware of this has been interesting. It's been fascinating to me. And one of the things I am delighted with the National Association about is they've given us some pretty strong resources to help us introduce the change and carry on with the change. It has been, again, because we've been talking about that so much, I'm walking a fine line with the new people, particularly I'm teaching. Well, I don't want you to be afraid to say anything, but I want you to be very cognizant of what you're saying. And it was heartwarming to me yesterday with a group of people I had who said, you know, we all just need to learn to, oh, here's a crazy idea, to think before we speak. Boy, I walked away and thought, oh, that's fabulous. I did good today teaching that. But I think that has been a real challenge for us, is to get people to have the idea that they need to think before they speak. How are you doing with introducing the changes that have come to the Code of Ethics?
Well, and of course, I live in Memphis, Tennessee, and we are perhaps one of well, several different cities that have problems being, let's be very honest, Memphis is a very racially divided city. And I don't think it's because we want to be divided, but I think it's an economic issue in many cases. Going back to the code of ethics and the changes that we made in the code of ethics, I know some people have kind of used the argument that it was a knee-jerk reaction based on the events of 2020, and that we kind of did this too quickly. You know what? I tend to agree with NAR's position that we should have done this a long time ago.
Thank you.
I completely, anytime I teach a code of ethics course, when we get to Article 10, I tend to kind of stomp my feet and raise my voice a little bit because of the city that I've grown up in, and because I was very young when Dr. King was killed in this city. This is extremely important to me. And I think it's critical that we look at agents and say, the code of ethics says we're not going to discriminate against these groups. It is even more important for us to say we're not going to discriminate against anyone. Period. It doesn't matter. As long as your money is green and you want to buy a house, I'll show you a house in any area of town. I'll do anything I can to help you. It doesn't matter who your parents were, where your family grew up, the language that you speak. It doesn't matter. Your sexuality doesn't matter. None of those things matter. It matters to me that I sell you a home, and probably most importantly, that we develop a relationship where you can refer business to me in the future. I want you to leave a transaction, a closing, and say, my gosh, you were one of the nicest people I've ever met. And I've worked with other people, that maybe weren't quite as nice as you. Because real estate isn't about selling houses, it's about selling yourself. And again, I'm of the opinion that we sell to everyone. We need to be our true selves to everyone. I believe that, as you said, the programs that NAR has put into place, the implicit bias training, the At Home with Diversity certification, and the whole the Fairview program.
Fairhaven.
Those have been so important. I actually did, Charlie Oppler had the challenge that leadership should all come back and go through all three of the programs. Well, I'd been through the Fairhaven program. I'd have the AHWD certification. And so the implicit bias training I did yesterday. And it's one of those where when I was done, it's about 50 minutes long. And I was done and I was sitting here like this going, oh my gosh, I said, it's 2021. I can't believe that we still have to have this conversation among ourselves to make sure we're all doing the right things. We should be doing the right things every day simply because we're human beings on the planet with other human beings. It still just blows my mind that we have to talk about Article 10 and that we have to talk about it in such detail. It's so very simple to follow that article completely. But again, I think it goes back to some of the people that post too much on social media as far as opinions and things like that. I think we have to be very careful about things like that. And as a brokerage, I think that needs to be, again, going back to policies and procedures, and let agents know that this is our position here. We're not going to say certain things. We're not going to take stances on, elections or any other thing. That we're going to remain very neutral because, and Deborah, I know you know this as well as anybody. If you post on, and let's just use Facebook as the example, and you post, I love dogs. Well, you've alienated the people that love cats. It's just the opposite. If you say, I love cats, you've alienated the dog people. It's better not to have an opinion on things like that. It goes back to what we said a few minutes ago. There are some times that you just need to be quiet, and then there are other times that you don't need to be typing on your keyboard.
Yes.
Period.
Yes. And I would agree with you. This has been such an interesting, you talk about where you're from, but I'm from Chicago and things are not swelling. I mean, we've had a little, there've been some troubles here in Chicago. We are also a highly segregated city. And I think it is wonderful that the realtors are stepping up and really saying, okay, we really are the gatekeepers and we really need to be better about this. I am impressed with the efforts. I truly, I am very impressed with the efforts the National Association is put to this. And at NSBAR, we are really putting a lot of oomph behind it, making an attempt to put a lot of oomph behind it as well. I think that the real estate profession is just an inherently risky one. One of the things we're thinking about
you
here.
think? You think?
I think I know. From the very fact that one of the stats I read was simply something like, you're safer being a coal miner than you are being a realtor. Crazy stuff like that. And I believe that to be true. How many people actually wake up every day and say, I want to go meet strange people in and empty houses in the middle of the night? People don't really do that. And yet we as realtors do things that are very similar to that. The COVID has made it more challenging for us in a lot of ways to get to know our clients, to get to understand our clients. I think in some ways we are taking more risks because we don't have the time to meet them ahead. People want to stay a little bit apart and those kinds of things. So I think it's been an interesting time. I think it's an interesting time to be a realtor right now. I do. I think it's a fascinating time. I think we're going to get a lot of new people who are going to bring a lot of kind of new ideas in. A lot of our people are coming in from hospitality. They're coming in from retail. They've got service bred into their bones. And I'm kind of hopeful that if we can hold on to that and then build the legal side of them, I think we're going to have a lot of really new realtors coming up. And the ways that we're going to do business are going to change as well. Certainly, how many, if I just said a year ago, so Greg, how many Zoom meetings are you doing? You'd have said, I don't know, you'd have said maybe one and I don't want to. That would have been what I would have told you. Maybe one and I don't want to. And I will tell you, I Zoom all the time now, and I'm getting pretty comfortable with the whole process of this. The changes that we have made, that we have operated. I'm also very impressed with the real estate industry, who took a really risky situation in the fact that the pandemic hit them. And they kind of sat for a week, at least in our markets. It was about a week. They sat for about a week and went, what will we do? And at the end of the week, they said, well, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. This is what we're going to do. We're going to keep everybody safe and sound, but we're going to keep doing business. We know people need housing. So I'm kind of impressed with the way they handled the risk of that as well. If you had to recommend the best class that people should attend at Home with Diversity, if you had to recommend the very best class that people should attend, actually we're doing an at Home with Diversity class, so I'm sort of selling that one. And I don't know if you know Maurice Hampton, but he's with us as well. So I'm kind of about that. But of all the designations, because you are a man with designations who's done designations, what was the most valuable designation you did?
Well, that's a tough question. I believe that each of them has value. I certainly like as a broker, the CRB courses I think have been very, very beneficial. As a practitioner, and I'm going to answer your question with 3 answers here. Okay. I think these are really important. I'm a firm believer in the seller representation specialist course, the ABR course, and the RENE course. And let me explain why. Well, we represent buyers and sellers. Don't we need to know how to represent them properly? And then with RENE, well, everything we do is a negotiation. So being able to hone those skills and put those 3 together, I think that gives someone especially newer in the business a really strong foundation for what we do. Now, again, our local associations and sometimes our state associations have other requirements. Obviously, the Code of Ethics is a requirement for membership. In Tennessee, we have what's called the TREC, Tennessee Real Estate Commission's core course, which goes through a little bit of everything, 8 or 9 chapters of, property management, contracts, agency, disclosures, and those are extremely important, again, especially for those agents that we're bringing in from other industries. And if I can just mention, I think one of the things that the more seasoned professionals can get from the people who may be a little bit newer in the business, and I believe you even made this point, we can learn a whole lot from them, especially from those that have been through customer service positions or may have been involved with a different kind of technology than we're used to using. Because let's face it, the pandemic has basically forced us to change the way we do business. And so I'm willing to say, and this may be, something that people would debate, we've probably advanced technology 5 to 7 years in 1 year because of the pandemic.
I would agree.
We've certainly learned as agents, because of the safety concerns that so many people not only have had, but continue to have about, buyers coming into their properties, buyers being, wearing a mask inside the property, using wipes to clean door, all of those different things that we've learned. And what we've been able to do in many cases is learn how to use an iPad to come in and tour a property, and use Facebook Live to be able to tour a property for someone. And I think that has, if you really consider it, it's expanded some of our business opportunities, because my market particularly, we have a lot of out of town, out of state investors. And this gives them an opportunity now to, instead of buying sight unseen, as a real estate professional, I can go through and video a property for them, and they've got a much better kind of handle on the market and on the area that they're considering purchasing, and specifically the house and any repairs that it might need. So while the pandemic has been awful, let's just be honest, we've also learned a lot and learned how to adapt our business. And I was very impressed how NAR handled it. I've been extremely impressed with how some of the local associations have handled it. Simply, some of them simply closing, some of them operating virtually, some of them operating from home. And we've seen a seamless transition from the in-person association to more of a virtual association. People have continued to sell houses. They've continued to be able to buy lock boxes and signs and everything else. So we've really advanced the cause of real estate over the last year. And as horrible as the pandemic has been for so many people, so many families who've lost loved ones, it has certainly, sometimes you have to see the silver lining. And the silver lining, in my opinion, has been we've advanced the technology, we've advanced the way we do business, and we understand now that there are some other ways to do business versus the more traditional side that we were taking prior to 2020.
And I couldn't agree with you more, Greg. I want to thank you so much for spending your time with me today. It was a pleasure to have you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I want to thank Greg for joining us today. His information has been very helpful to all of you, I hope. Please know that if you have any questions about risk management, we're always happy to take your questions and help in any way. Please remember to take a look at our calendar that comes to you every Sunday night and talks about what educational things are coming up. We have, certainly for those of you who are managing brokers finishing up, we have all the classes you need to do to complete your CE. Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciated being here.